Hello everyone, David here. Now we are going to listen to podcast news which includes national news of the day. While walking in the morning or evening, while cooking, cycling or during free time you can listen. It will be attributed to learning and understanding various accents and pronunciations. Listening improves the quality of communication and comprehension. Before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all to the virtual school. A new way of learning and teaching, with the vision of let's grow together. Our mission is to learn how to learn and teach how to teach. So stay tuned. And here we go. May 25, 2021. Important news. Odisha, Bengal grapple with evacuation ahead of Cyclone Yas will cross coast by May 26 noon, 10 locked to be moved to safety, Mamta. Staying secure, fishermen moving their boats to safe places near the Chandrabhaga beach in Odisha on Monday. Biswaranjan route by Swaranjan route. Shiv Sahai Singh Kolkata. As the storm system Yas heads towards the North Odisha West Bengal coast, several thousand people are set to be evacuated from the coastal districts of both states. Officials of the Regional Meteorological Center, RMC, in Kolkata said on Monday that the very severe cyclonic storm will make landfall by Wednesday. G.K. Das, Deputy Director and head of the RMC, said, the cyclone will cross on May 26 noon as a very severe cyclonic storm. It is likely to make landfall between the Paradip coast in Odisha and Sagar Island in West Bengal, close to Balasore in Odisha. Mr. Das predicted that at the time of landfall, wind speed in the districts of North Odisha and Purbo Medinpur in West Bengal would be about 155 to 165 kmph, gusting at 185 kmph. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamta Banerjee said the state was in the process of evacuating about 10 lakh people to cyclone shelters. We have about 4,000 cyclone shelters, where people who are being evacuated will be given shelter to minimize the loss of lives. 20 of the 23 districts will be affected by Yas. We have kept stock of relief materials at blocks. Control rooms are working round the clock in districts, blocks, and even in municipalities, Ms. Banerjee stated. The Chief Minister said power backup had been provided at hospitals. About 51 teams of the State Disaster Response Force had been posted at several strategic places in the state. Wind speeds over coastal areas in North and South 24 Parganas during landfall are likely to be 90 km 100 km, gusting 120 km at the time of the landfall. Migrant workers may just want to go home, says SC Top Court hears plea seeking rations, food for laborers. Krishnadas Rajagopal NEW Delhi. Scared, unemployed and hungry migrant workers may just want to go home and will hardly care for the finer nuances of the national and mini lockdowns imposed by the government, the Supreme Court said on Monday. Whether it was the national lockdown in 2020 or the mini lockdowns in 2021, psychologically, the attitude of migrant workers remains the same. They would want to go home, Justice M.R. Shah addressed the union government. A bench of Justices Ashok Bhushan and Shah was hearing a Suo Motu case to provide migrant laborer families marooned in big cities dry rations and cooked food and public transport to workers traveling home to their villages, where they think they would be safe from the clutches of the virus. Justice Shah's remark came when the government said the situation in 2021 was different from last year, when the entire nation was shut down to curb infection. Responding quickly, the government submitted that it had opened control rooms. But it was the responsibility of the states to provide cooked food for stranded migrant workers. The court, not quite taken in by the submissions, referred to an affidavit filed by the government. Justice Bhushan said the document mentioned only people covered under the Food Security Act, that is, people with ration cards. The court said unorganized laborers, wandering from one place of work to another in megacities, could not be expected to have ration cards. The court asked the center to file a further affidavit detailing everything it has done to provide dry rations to migrant workers under the Atmanirbhar scheme. Initially, during the beginning of the hearing, Justice Bhushan sounded skeptical, wondering whether the migrants' plight in the second wave was as bad as last year. Justices Bhushan and Shah had passed a plethora of orders for the welfare of migrant workers in 2020. This time the situation is not as grim as last time, Justice Bhushan said. Grimmer this time. Advocate Prashant Bhushan, who accused the center and the states of a lackluster approach on migrant workers, said, "In fact, it is grimmer this time. Public health has been more severely affected in the second wave. As a result, more people have again lost their jobs." Hospitals' ICU occupancy tells a serious COVID tale in Delhi. Non-ICU patients reduced by 58% while ICU saw a drop of 11%. Jatan Anand, New Delhi. The sharp dip in COVID-19 cases in the capital is reflected in the discharge of patients from general COVID wards of hospitals in the past few days, but not in those occupying ICU beds. On May 10, the number of patients on ICU beds was 5,403, a figure that dropped to 4,798, over 11% on May 22. According to Delhi government statistics, the cumulative tally of active COVID-positive cases recorded a decline of 67%, plummeting from 83,809 to 27,610 between May 10 and 22, and the number of non-ICU patients reduced by over 58% from 12,740 to 5,226. More and more COVID-19 patients are being discharged from hospitals on a daily basis, indicating the steady departure of the second wave of novel coronavirus infection from the capital. But the thousands of seriously ill among them who continue to occupy ICU beds have emerged as a cause for concern. According to doctors, this indicates both the virulence of new variants as well as the severity of lung damage suffered by COVID patients who contracted the infection in the second wave. More younger patients. During the second wave we have come across more younger patients than older ones. Much damage to the respiratory system along with issues such as sepsis and multiple organ failure have been noticed in patients, which necessitates their need for intensive care, said Dr. Sarvankar Dutta of AIIMS. This, even as discharge figures were more than double the number of COVID-19 patients admitted on Sunday, 905 against 412. This also happens to be the lowest number of hospital admissions in the city since April 5 when 406 COVID-19 patients were admitted. Lack of timely access to oxygen after contracting the infection has also been observed as a reason for the extent of lung damage. Patients in ICUs this time are certainly taking more time to recover, said Dr. Ashwin Malia, consultant urologist and robotic surgeon, Sir Gangaram Hospital, who handled numerous COVID patients this year. There are also instances where they have returned to ICUs because of post-COVID complications given the damage to their lungs, he said. Covaxin, government reviews process to get Hunad 90% of paperwork done by BBIL, sources. Suhasini Haidar, New Delhi. The government on Monday took stock of Bharat Biotech's application process with the World Health Organization, WHO, for regulatory clearances for the Covaxin vaccine, as an interministerial group, led by Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla, met with company representatives in Delhi. The meeting, that included senior officials from the Ministry of External Affairs, the Ministry of Health and the Department of Biotechnology, with Bharat Biotech International Limited, BBIL, Managing Director Dr. Krishna Mohan, went over the paperwork submitted in April for the WHO's emergency use listing, EUL, amidst concerns that Indians who have taken Covaxin doses will face travel restrictions in the absence of global regulatory approval. On the issue of WHO's authorization for emergency use listing, EUL, BBIL noted that they had submitted 90% of the documentation required for EUL to WHO. The remaining is expected to be submitted in June 2021. BBIL is confident about obtaining WHO EUL subsequently, given its experience of getting its other vaccines pre-qualified by WHO, sources present at the meeting said. Bharat Biotech is yet to publish results in any peer-reviewed journal of its Phase 3 trials and has so far only announced interim clinical results claiming 81% efficacy. Indian Council of Medical Research Chief Dr. Balram Bhargava has also said that the publication is likely in June. DGCA Dero stirs crew after wedding in skies rituals were performed as the aircraft hovered over Madurai Meenakshi Temple. In deep waters, the couple getting married on board a chartered flight from Madurai on Monday. Aniyani. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. A wedding in the skies has invited the wrath of the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, DGCA. On Monday, it suspended the crew of a SpiceJet chartered plane after a wedding ceremony aboard the aircraft, over Madurai, in violation of COVID-19 norms. The airline has been ordered to file an FIR against the errant passengers. Pictures viral on social media showed the bride and groom exchanging garlands surrounded by relatives and camera persons. Many could be seen without masks. The wedding rituals were performed as the aircraft hovered over Madurai Meenakshi Temple in the presence of over 160 relatives. Aviation website Flightradar 24 shows the plane circling above the temple. We have derostered the crew and directed the airline to lodge a complaint against those not following COVID-19 appropriate behavior with relevant authorities. We will take strict action, a DGCA official said, adding that they were examining if the use of cameras on board violated safety protocols. In March, after being pulled up the Delhi High Court, the DGCA ordered airlines to ensure that passengers comply with COVID-19 norms on mask wearing and social distancing. It said that if passengers did not pay heed, they must be removed from the aircraft and put on a no-fly list. The client was clearly briefed on COVID-19 guidelines to be followed and denied permission for any activity on board. The approval for this flight was taken as a joyride for the wedding group, the airline said in response to a query on the incident. Sushil Kumar spends first night in lockup on the floor. Wrestler has been arrested in a murder case, will be taken to Chhatrasal Stadium to recreate crime scene. Olympic wrestler Sushil Kumar and an accomplice were arrested near Mundka metro station on May 23. Dinj Joshi, Saurabh Tribe in New Delhi. Two-time Olympic medalist wrestler Sushil Kumar, who has been sent to 6 days police custody in connection with a murder case, spent his first night in the lockup on the floor with only a blanket for his comfort. As per procedure, before putting him in the lockup he was thoroughly frisked. He was asked to remove any ornaments, as well as his belt and shoes. No outside food was allowed to him. He ate food from the police mess. He was quiet and not interactive. After the paperwork, he was handed over to the crime branch at 3 a.m. for further investigation, said a police officer. A senior officer said that during interrogation, they asked Mr. Kumar about his rivalry with the victim, 23-year-old wrestler Sagar Dhankar, and what led him to beat Sagar and others. He was also questioned about ownership and background of the property that was the cause of the brawl. He answered several questions but remained quiet when asked about people who helped him after the incident when he was evading arrest, as well as the whereabouts of his phone and the CCTV video recordings, which he allegedly took from Chhatrasal Stadium after the brawl, said the officer. The scooty that was recovered from him during the arrest belongs to a sportswoman. He stayed at her house on Saturday. On Sunday morning, he took her scooty to meet a contact to borrow some money, said the officer. The police said that Mr. Kumar and his accomplice Ajay will be taken to the stadium to recreate the scene of the crime for investigation purpose. We will counter him with electronic evidence that establishes his role in the crime. The video of the brawl that was purportedly shot to create terror among wrestlers will also be shown to him to identify the other accused involved in the crime. We have also discovered the role of Haryana-based gangster Sandeep alias Kala Jayadai in the crime. We have to establish the role of each person during investigation, said the officer. On May 23, Delhi police, while seeking his custody, had stated in court that Mr. Kumar and his accomplices thrashed the victims like animals as he wanted to establish his terror in the area. After the brawl, he took away the recordings of CCTVs in the stadium. He was officer on special duty, OSD, at the stadium and he had access to the CCTV room. Railway may suspend him. Meanwhile, the Delhi government has written to the Railway Board regarding the FIR lodged against Mr. Kumar. Once we receive the letter, then we will take action and he will be suspended, said Northern Railway spokesperson. A senior commercial manager with the Northern Railway, Mr. Kumar had been on deputation with the Delhi government since 2015 and was posted as an OSD at Chhatrasal Stadium. His deputation was extended in 2020 and Mr. Kumar had applied for an extension for 2021 as well, which had been rejected by the Delhi government, and he was sent back to his parent Qatar Northern Railway. Court seeks report on Gambhir buying COVID-19 drugs in bulk. Drug controller of Delhi government told to probe similar allegations against AAP Malays. BJP MP Gautam Gambhir Sandeep Saxena. Staff reporter New Delhi. The Delhi High Court on Monday directed the drug controller to give a status report on its inquiry on how politicians such as BJP MP Gautam Gambhir were able to buy COVID-19 drugs in bulk amid shortages. Responsible act? Mr. Gautam Gambhir must have done it to genuinely help the needy. Let us be clear about it. But the issue is that a responsible behavior? Should he not have realized that medicines are in shortage for others? A bench of Justice Vipin Sanghai and Justice Jasmeet Singh remarked. The High Court also directed the drug controller of Delhi government to probe into allegations of procuring and hoarding medical oxygen made against AAP Mlays Preeti Tomar and Praveen Kumar. Want prescription? On Mr. Gambhir, the HC wanted to know how he was able to procure 2,343 strips of tab Faviflud when the drug was in such short supply in the city. The court also queried how a chemist was able to entertain such a prescription. We want to see the prescription, the High Court said, adding that a chemist is supposed to dispense medicines only to patients. A chemist is not a bulk supplier. He has undertaken a retail sale which has to be to a retail customer, it said. Mr. Gambhir must have done it with best of intentions. He has been a national player. We are sure he had good intentions. But the way he has gone about it, he has actually done a disservice, unintentionally maybe, the court observed. Plea on FIR. The HC's direction came while hearing a petition seeking lodging of an FIR against politicians who allegedly were able to procure COVID-19 drugs in huge quantity. The Delhi police, in its status report, stated that 2,628 strips of tab Faviflud was bought by Gambhir Foundation through one Manish of Gard Hospital. While 2,343 strips were distributed to patients, remaining 285 strips were deposited with Delhi government's Director General of Health Services for distribution. Taking note of the report, the court said it needed to be probed how these medicines were distributed to several patients or attendants by Dr. Manish. It also noted the DCP concerned have collected the supporting documents in relation to the case. Those who have beaten COVID-19 must focus on mental health, eat well. Nikhil Mbabu, New Delhi. Deputy Medical Superintendent of Delhi Government's LNJP Hospital, Ritu Saxena, says people who have recovered from COVID-19 must eat a well-balanced diet and exercise regularly in order to fully recuperate from the disease. What should people do after recovering from COVID-19? How much time does it take to recuperate? After recovering from COVID-19, people should try to keep their mental health strong. What we find is that the disease has a psychosocial impact on the person's health. Also, concentrate on good nutrition. After any major illness, the body becomes weak. So, we have seen many patients getting bacterial infections after recovering and they are coming to the hospital with UTI or other infections. Exercising is also very important. If it was a very severe case of COVID-19, then the patient may take months to recuperate. If not, the patient recuperates in 15 to 20 days. What type of exercises should people do? Some people, who suffered a severe infection, get very weak during the illness and are not able to do any physical activity. Those who have mild symptoms should continue physical activity such as taking a stroll in an isolated area even when they are positive. Also, they should do breathing exercises such as pranayam. Once they have recovered, they should go to open areas and do stretching, yoga, and continue with the breathing exercises. Take it light in the beginning and exercise as per the body's demand. If you are feeling comfortable, then you can slowly increase intensity. What type of foods should people eat after testing negative? During COVID-19, many people suffer loss of taste and basically a healthy diet. You should also take Nabupani lemon water, tender coconut water etc. for vitamin C and stay hydrated. Any medicine or supplements. People are taking all sorts of supplements. If you are okay after recovery, then taking a well-balanced diet will be enough. Vitamins are needed 15 to 20 days from the start of the disease. If you had severe infection and were hospitalized and still feeling very weak, then continue with supplements as per directions of the doctor. One should not take too much of supplements. Which patients, with existing conditions, should be careful? People with diabetes, chronic kidney disease, pregnant women, and immunocompromised people, who had TB or HIV, should take more care than others. For people with diabetes, if they were given steroids, then their sugar levels may fluctuate, and they should be careful. What are the problems that patients face post-recovery? People who have recovered are complaining of body pain, weakness, and some are even complaining of pain in one particular arm or leg. These are symptoms of vitamin deficiency. But the risky ones are where sugar levels are not in control, blood pressure is fluctuating, or fungal infection. Black fungus cases are increasing. It is usually seen in people who are on heavy doses of steroids. They should take care of hygiene and maintain proper sugar levels. We are also seeing white fungal infection, which happens most of the time inside the mouth. It can be easily taken care of by taking an oral antifungal, and also with vitamin supplements and proper diet. White fungal infection is seen in people recovering from any prolonged illness. How is the post-recovery phase different during this wave? One major difference is that during the last wave, people were getting better within a few days of testing negative. But this time, in the post-recovery phase also many are complaining of fever not subsiding and body pain. Even a month after getting infected, some are complaining of fever and dry cough. Last time, in most cases, people were recovering in 14 days. Hisar administration withdraws cases registered against farmers defying the lockdown. A large number of them had protested during CM's visit. Farmer leaders addressing the gathering in Hisar on Monday. Special arrangement. Ashok Kumar Gurugram. Following a meeting with the farmer unions amid massive demonstrations in the district, the Hisar district administration on Monday agreed to withdraw the cases registered against farmers for the May 16 violence during Haryana Chief Minister Manohar Lal's visit. The All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee, Haryana chapter, in a press statement, termed the acceptance of the demands as a victory of the farmers. After a marathon discussion between the administration led by Hisar Divisional Commissioner Chandrasekhar and the Samayukat Kisan Morcha leaders, it was accepted that police cases registered regarding May 16 happenings and those prior to it will be withdrawn and a kin of the farmer who died today on Monday due to cardiac attack will be given job, the statement said. Peaceful demonstrations. An official statement from the district administration said the farmers were told to ensure that further demonstrations in the district should be peaceful. All India Kisan Sabha, AIKS, National President Ashok Dhawal, Bharatiya Kisan Union National Spokesperson Rakesh Tikkat, Bharatiya Kisan Union, Karanai, President Gurnam Singh Karanai, Bharatiya Kisan Union, Rajwal, President Balbir Singh Rajwal, All India Kisan Sabha, Haryana, Vice President Inderjit Singh, and AIKS, Punjab, General Secretary, Major Singh Punwala, among others, were present. Earlier, defying the lockdown, a large number of farmers, including women, traveling in tractors, multi-utility vehicles, and mini trucks, started assembling at Crandaman Park in Hisar around noon from across the state, despite attempts by the police to prevent them from entering the city. Condemning the police action against the farmers, Mr. Rajwal said those in power had forgotten that they were the representatives of the people and the attack on the farmers in Hisar was an attack on the entire farming community. He also made an appeal to the farmers to maintain peace and calm to make this movement a success. Mr. Karanai said the farmers had gathered seeking the withdrawal of the cases registered against them and demanding action against the police officers for pelting stones at the farmers. He said the administration should also book the CM for violating COVID-19 protocols during the inauguration of the hospital on May 16. Will not limit functions till new data law. WhatsApp will continue current approach, it says. Privacy of users remains our highest priority, the platform said. Reuters Data Rubik. Yuthika Bhargava, New Delhi. Facebook-owned WhatsApp has told the government that it will not limit functionality for users in the coming weeks, but will continue the current approach of reminding users about the update until at least the forthcoming personal data protection law comes into effect. WhatsApp has said this in its response to the notice by the Government of India asking the platform to withdraw the controversial update to its privacy policy. The government had sought a response within 7 days, warning of steps in consonance with law in case of failure of a satisfactory response. Highest priority. We have responded to the Government of India's letter and assured them that the privacy of users remains our highest priority. As a reminder, the recent update does not change the privacy of people's personal messages. Its purpose is to provide additional information about how people can interact with businesses if they choose to do so, a WhatsApp spokesperson said. The spokesperson added that WhatsApp will not limit the functionality of how the platform works in the coming weeks. Instead, it will continue to remind users from time to time about the update as well as when people choose to use relevant optional features, like communicating with a business that is receiving support from Facebook. We hope this approach reinforces the choice that all users have whether or not they want to interact with a business. We will maintain this approach until at least the forthcoming PDP law comes into effect, the spokesperson added. The Ministry of Electronics and IT, in the May 18 notice, had told WhatsApp that deferring the May 15 implementation deadline does not absolve it from respecting the values of informational privacy, data security, and user choice for Indian users. As per the government, WhatsApp's updated privacy policy was a violation of several provisions of the existing Indian laws. Interview Sitaram Yechuri. People want secular forces to come together against the BJP except Assam, where the difference of vote between BJP and secular parties was minuscule. In other states the BJP has come a cropper, says CPI-M General Secretary. Sopanike Nair. CPI-M General Secretary Sitaram Yechuri speaks on the joint opposition efforts on COVID-19 and farm laws, and says it is for parties such as the BSP and the AAP and the Chief Ministers of Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana to answer why they are not standing with the rest of the opposition against the government. He cast aside the fears that Kerala Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan will overshadow the party. On the question of the pandemic and the 3 farm laws, the opposition parties have issued 4 joint statements since December last year. Could you talk us through the efforts to bring everyone on board? During the course of the first wave, 21 parties had a virtual meeting following which we came up with a joint memorandum suggesting measures that the government must immediately take, including direct cash transfers and free food for the vulnerable sections. The government, of course, has never responded to any of our letters, whether written jointly or individually. Steps that ought to have been taken last year were not taken, and we are paying the price for it. On the questions of saving people's lives and their livelihood, there is a commonality between the opposition parties. In the time of the pandemic where physical consultations can't take place, it takes a little longer to reach out to everyone either through virtual meetings or phones. But in my mind, it is absolutely necessary for the parties to come on one platform to hold the government accountable. The BSP, which was a signatory to the joint opposition letter of May 2 urging the government to streamline distribution of medical oxygen, has not been a signatory to the 2 later letters. Overall, they have been erratic about their participation in the unified opposition effort. The AAP, on the other hand, has never been part of any of these efforts. Is it the AAP and the BSP's reluctance, or is it the reluctance of the rest of the opposition parties to bring them on board? It is for the BSP and the AAP to answer this question. The BSP signed the May 2 letter, and then the UP local body elections came and didn't sign the subsequent 2 letters. It is for them to answer on why they stayed away. It is similar for the AAP. In fact, the Chief Ministers of Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana have not been part of any of these efforts. We want every opposition party to join in, especially when the country is going through this COVID catastrophe. We also must remember that the Indian economy was already on a downslide before the pandemic. With the onset of the pandemic, there has been immense loss of livelihood. To counter that, the government should have taken measures such as direct cash transfer and free food, which every other country in the world has done. Will these efforts be limited to joint letters, or will we have some sort of a coalition come together for the Uttar Pradesh Assembly polls scheduled for next year? The UP polls are still some time away, and a lot of water will flow in the Ganga before that. Unfortunately, there are bodies also floating in the Ganga because of the misadministration of the Narendra Modi government at the center and the Yogi Adityanath government in the state. Lessons have to be learned from the results of the recent assembly polls. Except for Assam, where the difference of vote between the BJP and the secular parties was minuscule, allowing the BJP to scrape through, in all the other states the BJP has come a cropper. Look at the results of the local body elections in UP and Gujarat. It is writing on the wall. People want the secular forces to come together against the BJP. The CPI-M claimed that all the ministers from the first Pinarayi Vijayan cabinet were changed as part of a policy decision, but couldn't the party make an exception for former health minister KK Shalja? The decision on who to include and exclude from the cabinet was taken by the state committee. And it was a unanimous decision. KK Shalja's contribution in managing the pandemic is widely accepted and appreciated within Kerala, within the country and across the world. But remember, she was also a first-time minister in the outgoing cabinet. The exception would not have worked for two reasons. First, it is not a correct position to take, and second, it is not workable. If you were to make an exception for Shalja, then what about Finance Minister T.M. Thomas Isaac? He too was very successful and responsible for developing the alternative Kerala development mode. Also, what about PWD Minister G. Sudhkaran, who was equally efficient? And there are many such examples. Even in my case, the two-term rule for the Rajya Sabha was strictly adhered to despite a lot of outcry. Once you make an exception, then that becomes the rule. And as far as promoting women leaders is concerned, the outgoing cabinet had 2 women ministers, and this time we have 3. There is a fear that Brand Pinarayi Vijayan will tower over the CPI-M, overshadowing the party. Your comments. Such thinking can only emerge from parties that have a high command culture that turn to accept a supreme leader. And this is true for most political parties. The CPI-M has an entirely different style and method. We are a party with a vibrant inter-party democracy. For us, it is the collective is always above the individual. How many times has the party rejected the view of the General Secretary to go with the collective view? And that is not just in my case. There are many other precedents, including the often quoted example of Jyoti Basu, who didn't become PM despite support of then General Secretary Comrade Surjit because the party collectively felt that it would be wrong. Only those who don't understand how the party works raise these questions. What is the future for the party after total annihilation in West Bengal? The dominant feeling of the electorate in Bengal was to keep the BJP out, because of their own campaign which was antagonistic to the ethos and culture of Bengal. The paramount question that the Bengal voters asked is who could defeat the BJP. And this sentiment was not limited to Bengal alone. People in Tamil Nadu and Kerala too voted to keep the BJP away from the administration. In Kerala, the BJP lost its lone seat. In Bengal, the anti-BJP vote was cast rather than pro-TMC. And in a first-past-the-post system that we inherited from the British, in a bipartisan contest the third force gets squeezed out. The actual political battle has just begun. The CPI-M fielded a lot of fresh faces and new blood has been injected into the party, who will now be the future of the party. Wasn't an alliance with the Indian Secular Front led by Farfarashi cleric Abbas Siddiqui blatantly wrong, and is the party reviewing its decision? A review is underway for all the states, not only Bengal, which will throw up its own conclusions. Our objective in Bengal was to rally all the secular forces. The Indian Secular Front, though headed by a certain person with a certain past, had in its leadership marginalist classes, Dalits, tribals. We go by what the party stands for. Provide food, rations to stranded workers. SC Court asks states to file affidavits. Give publicity about the welfare schemes for migrant workers, the bench said. Legal correspondent, New Delhi. The Supreme Court on Monday ordered states across the country to distribute dry rations to stranded migrant workers without ration cards and run community kitchens for them. Let all states file affidavits indicating the mechanism by which the dry ration should be distributed to those migrant workers who do not possess a ration card, a bench of Justices Ashok Bhushan and M.R. Shah directed. The court left it to the discretion of individual states to utilize either the center's Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, which was implemented for giving dry rations to migrant workers in May and June of 2020, or any other alternative scheme. The bench held it was the responsibility of the states and union territories to run community kitchens for migrant laborers who have lost their employment and are in need of 2 meals a day. The bench directed that wide publicity should be given about the various welfare schemes for migrant workers, including locations of community kitchens, so that needy persons would benefit. The court, however, refused a plea to direct states to provide direct cash transfers to migrant workers, saying this was a matter of policy concerning individual states or UTs. Theo Ryder came on submissions made by advocate Prashant Bhushan, appearing for some activists, that the number of community kitchens in Delhi had reduced this year. Cash transfers were restricted to construction workers in the national capital. He said dry rations were not provided to stranded migrant workers. 90%-95% of mucormycosis patients are diabetics on steroids. Early detection key to tackling condition, says AIIMS chief. Close watch, doctors checking eyes of patients suspected to have been infected with mucormycosis in Thane.pti. Special correspondent, New Delhi. Mucormycosis is not a communicable disease, and 90%-95% of patients that we have with us currently are diabetics who were on steroids. We are also seeing the fungus early on in COVID patients, which is proving to be a challenge, Randeep Guleria, director of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, said on Monday. Dr. Guleria, speaking at the Health Ministry press conference, added that early detection and hygiene were key to tackling the virus. Mucormycosis is one of the general fungal infections being seen in recovering or recovered COVID-19 patients. The number of cases being reported is increasing, but it is not a communicable disease, meaning it does not spread from one person to another, like COVID-19 does, he said. Not correct term. Dr. Guleria also said it is better not to use the term black fungus while talking of mucormycosis, as it leads to a lot of avoidable confusion. Black fungus is another family. This term got associated with mucormycosis due to the presence of black dots among the culture of white fungal colonies. In general, there are various types of fungal infections such as Candida, Aspergillosis, Cryptococcus, Histoplasmosis, and Coccidioidomycosis. Mucormycosis, Candida, and Aspergillosis are the ones observed more in those with low immunity, he said. Many patients taking treatment at home, who were not on oxygen therapy, have also been found to get infected with mucormycosis. So there is no definite link between oxygen therapy and catching the infection, Dr. Guleria clarified. Stating that the antifungal treatment is long drawn over many weeks, Dr. Guleria said that was proving to be challenging for hospitals, since COVID-positive patients and COVID-negative patients who catch mucormycosis need to be housed in separate hospital wards. Surgery also needs to be done judiciously, since aggressive surgery for mucormycosis can have adverse outcomes for COVID patients. Maintaining proper hygiene is very important for diabetic patients, since chances of opportunistic infection is very high in such patients. Those using oxygen concentrators should ensure cleaning of humidifiers regularly, he said. Post-COVID issues. Besides this, even among those recovering we are seeing symptoms including chronic fatigue, joint pains, headaches, brain fog, cough etc. for anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks. As our knowledge of the virus is growing, doctors are able to help the recovering patients who need to keep an eye out for any post-COVID symptoms. He added that difficulty in concentrating, insomnia and depression are other signs to watch out for. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Hira to present international news.
Thank you, Mr. David, for this wonderful presentation. Hello everyone, I'm Hira presenting to you international news. So stay tuned and here we go. International news. Wuhan lab staff fell sick in November 2019. Report this comes on the eve of key WHO meeting, and may boost calls for a wider probe into virus origins. Origin tracing, a file photo of researchers at work in the Wuhan Institute of Virology in Hubei province. AP. Reuters, Washington. 3 researchers from China's Wuhan Institute of Virology, WIV, sought hospital care in November 2019, A month before China reported the first cases of COVID-19, the Wall Street Journal reported on Sunday, citing a U.S. intelligence report. The newspaper said the previously undisclosed report, which provides fresh details on the number of researchers affected, the timing of their illnesses, and their hospital visits, may add weight to calls for a broader investigation into whether the COVID-19 virus could have escaped from the laboratory. The journal said current and former officials familiar with the intelligence expressed a range of views about the strength of the report's supporting evidence, with one unnamed person saying it needed further investigation and additional corroboration. China denies report. The first cases of what would eventually be known as COVID-19 were reported at the end of December 2019 in the Chinese city of Wuhan, where the advanced laboratory specializing in coronavirus research is located. Chinese scientists and officials have consistently rejected the lab leak hypothesis, saying SARS-CoV-2 could have been circulating in other regions before it hit Wuhan, and might have even entered China from another country via imported frozen food shipments or wildlife trading. China's foreign ministry spokesman, Zhao Lijian, said on Monday that it was completely untrue that 3 members of staff at WIV had fallen ill. The US continues to hype up the lab leak theory, he said. Does it care about traceability, or is it just trying to distract attention? The journal report came on the eve of a meeting of the World Health Organization's decision-making body, which is expected to discuss the next phase of an investigation into the origins of COVID-19. Asked about the report, WHO spokesman Tarik Jasarevic said that the organization's technical teams were now deciding on the next steps. He said further study was needed into the role of animal markets as well as the lab leak hypothesis. A U.S. National Security Council spokeswoman had no comment on the report but said the Biden administration continued to have serious questions about the earliest days of the COVID-19 pandemic, including its origins within the People's Republic of China. "We're not going to make pronouncements that prejudge an ongoing WHO study into the source of SARS-CoV-2, but we have been clear that sound and technically credible theories should be thoroughly evaluated by international experts," she said. A joint study into the origins of COVID-19 by the WHO and China published at the end of March said it was extremely unlikely that it had escaped from a lab. But China was accused of failing to disclose raw data on early COVID-19 cases to the WHO team. EU mulls shunning Belarusian airspace over forced landing leaders to hold summit, may tighten sanctions on Minsk. Security personnel checking the luggage of passengers at the Minsk International Airport on Sunday. AP. Reuters. Brussels. The European Union is considering shunning Belarus airspace and banning national carrier Belavia from EU airports after Belarusian authorities scrambled a warplane and forced a Ryanair jetliner to land in Minsk. Western leaders reached for the strongest language to condemn Sunday's incident, in which a Belarusian warplane intercepted a flight between Greece and Lithuania and forced it down in Minsk, where a dissident journalist was arrested. Countries have called for the release of 26-year-old Roman Protasevich. EU leaders will discuss tightening sanctions already in place against Minsk at a summit on Monday evening, and could also restrict ground transit links between Belarus and the bloc. Together with international partners, we will work to close the airspace of Belarus to international flights, Lithuanian Prime Minister Ingrida Šimonytė said on Monday. France's Europe Minister, Clement Beaune, called the plane's forced diversion an act of state piracy that cannot be left unpunished, and proposed tougher sanctions against Belarus. "We are working on a package of measures that go beyond sanctions against individuals, and may also suspend ground transit links with the EU," French President Emmanuel Macron's office said. The EU has blacklisted 88 individuals and 7 firms accused of repression and intimidation, following protests against President Alexander Lukashenko's victory in election last year, which opponents say was rigged. The sanctions also include a ban on travel to the EU for Mr. Lukashenko and his son. Myanmar's Suu Kyi defiant in first comments since coup. She made her first court appearance after her detention. Aung San Suu Kyi. File photo pol. Agence France Presse Naypyidaw. Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi on Monday voiced defiance as she made her first court appearance since being detained in a coup, vowing her ousted political party would live on. Myanmar has been in uproar since the February 1st putsch, with near-daily protests and a nationwide civil disobedience movement. More than 800 people have been killed by the military, according to a local monitoring group. The junta has threatened to dissolve her National League for Democracy, which swept elections in 2020, over alleged voter fraud. The Nobel laureate, who has not been seen in public since the coup, sounded healthy and fully confident during the 30-minute meeting, her lawyer Min So said. She wishes her people to stay healthy as well as affirmed the NLD will exist as long as people exist because it was founded for people. Ms. Suu Kyi has been hit with a string of criminal charges including flouting coronavirus restrictions during last year's election campaign and possessing unlicensed walkie-talkies. There have been weeks of delays to Ms. Suu Kyi's legal case and her lawyers have struggled to gain access to her. The next hearing was set for June 7th, Mr. Min So said, adding she had also met with former President Win Myint, who was ousted and detained along with Ms. Suu Kyi. As the lawyers left the compound in Naypyidaw, police arrested a legal representative of senior NLD figure Myo Aung, lawyers said. There was a heavy security presence in the capital, an AFP correspondent said. Afghan security forces, Taliban clash near Kabul, 37 checkpoints captured, insurgents. Agence France Presse Mitalam. Afghan forces clashed with Taliban fighters in a provincial capital about 120 kilometers from Kabul, officials and witnesses said, prompting the defense minister to take charge of a counter-offensive. Violence has soared in Afghanistan since US forces began their final pullout on May 1st, as the insurgents press on with a campaign to seize new territory. Fierce fighting erupted on Sunday on the edge of Mitalam, a city of around 140,000 people and the capital of Laghman province. At one point Defense Minister Yassin Zia took personal charge in the field, officials said. With the arrival of reinforcements, the enemy has sustained heavy blows, General Zia, a former army chief of staff, said. The ministry said at least 50 Taliban fighters were killed in overnight fighting. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid told AFP the insurgents captured 37 security checkpoints on the outskirts of the city. Both sides frequently exaggerate their successes and minimize losses. Fighting continued in some parts of Mitalam on Monday, with hundreds of people displaced. A student, who gave just his first name Zabihullah, said he went to school after government forces assured him they had control, but had to flee when fighting resumed. I'm not sure which part of the city is safe now, he told AFP. Iran inspection agreement extended by 1 month, IAEA. Agence France Presse Vienna. The UN nuclear watchdog and Iran have agreed to extend an understanding to monitor Tehran's activities by 1 month, the agency said on Monday, while talks in Vienna tried to save the 2015 nuclear deal. The equipment and the verification and the monitoring activities that we agreed will continue as they are now for 1 month expiring on June 24, 2021. It has been monitoring as part of the 2015 landmark deal. An agreement, reached on February 21 for a duration of 3 months, allowed some inspections to continue. Mr. Grossi said that besides extending that understanding, Tehran had also agreed that information collected so far by agency equipment in Iran would not be erased. Current talks between world powers are aiming to bring the US back into the deal. Assailant stabs soldier, civilian in Jerusalem. Agents France Press Jerusalem. An assailant stabbed 2 young Israeli men before being shot dead by police at a tram station in Jerusalem on Monday, Israeli police said. Attacker shot and killed, police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld said. Hadassah Medical Center said it was treating 2 men in their 20s for stab wounds. Both were in moderate condition and one was identified by the army as a soldier. There was no immediate confirmation of the assailant's identity. The incident happened a short distance from Sheikh Jarrah, which saw weeks of protests against the planned expulsion of Palestinians from their homes. Blinken off to West Asia to push peace talks after Gaza ceasefire. He will meet the leaders of Israel and Palestinian Authority. Antony Blinken. Associated Press Washington. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to West Asia to press the Israelis, Palestinians and regional players to build on last week's Gaza ceasefire by laying the groundwork for an eventual resumption in long-stalled peace talks. President Joe Biden announced Mr. Blinken would depart on Monday for a short visit to Israel, the West Bank, Jordan and Egypt for what will be the Biden administration's highest-level in-person meetings on the crisis that erupted earlier this month. Mr. Blinken's primary goal will be to shore up the ceasefire in the hope that it will hold, discuss an urgent infusion of humanitarian assistance into Gaza, stress the need for an end to intracommunal violence within Israeli cities and lay the preliminary groundwork for a return to peace talks, according to a senior State Department official. In a statement, Mr. Biden said Mr. Blinken will work with regional partners to ensure the coordinated international effort to ensure immediate assistance reaches Gaza. While Mr. Blinken will meet with the leaders of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Egypt and Jordan, he will not see anyone from the militant Hamas movement that runs Gaza. Hamas is a US-designated, foreign terrorist organization, and contacts between American officials and the group are banned. That means the US must rely on third countries like Egypt and Qatar to pass messages to Hamas. Blinken said Sunday that the behind-the-scenes effort led by Mr. Biden paid off, securing a truce after 11 days. Virus killed 115,000 health workers, WHO. Agents France Press Geneva. At least 115,000 health and care workers have died from COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic, the WHO chief said Monday. At the opening of the World Health Organization's main annual assembly, Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus hailed the sacrifices made by health workers around the world to battle the pandemic. We estimate that at least 115,000 health and care workers have paid the ultimate price in the service of others. Nepal urges US to provide vaccines on priority basis. It asks for a share from surplus doses. Kallol Bhattacharjee NEW Delhi. Nepal on Monday urged the US to provide vaccines on a priority basis, according to an official statement. In a telephonic conversation with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, Nepal's Foreign Minister Pradeep Gyawali asked for a share of the surplus Oxford AstraZeneca doses that the US intends to distribute among the developing countries, according to the statement. Minister Gyawali conveyed the gratitude of the government of Nepal to the United States for the generous COVID-related cooperation, which helped scale up the national capacity to address the pandemic. Commending the U.S. leadership in garnering collaborative response against the global pandemic, the foreign minister requested the Deputy Secretary of State to accord due priority to Nepal during the distribution of surplus vaccines among the developing nations, the official statement said. This comes 2 days after Nepal received the first emergency support from the US, which included ventilators, protection gears and oxygen cylinders. Boris Johnson sets wedding date, report. Agence France Presse London. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his fiancée Kerry Simons have set a wedding date for next year after delaying plans due to the pandemic, The Sun tabloid reported on Monday. Mr. Johnson will be only the second Prime Minister ever to marry while in office, following Robert Jenkinson in 1822. The couple have sent, save the date, cards for July 30th next year. Ms. Simons, 33, former head of communications for the Conservative Party, gave birth to their son Wilfred in April last year. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video as podcast. Do like, share and comment. Press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get new notifications. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. God bless you all. Jai Maa Bharti.